Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, the festive period may have arrived, but there's very little Christmas cheer among households, businesses and workers who will struggle to put food on the table this weekend. Our business correspondent Simon Pusey will be joining me in the studio, reflecting on what led to Britain being ground to a halt this winter. And despite the challenges of COVID-19, Africa has the fastest growing population of internet users in the world, thanks to its youthful demographic. Keye Oduneye, a communication and change consultant, will be joining me in the studio to talk about the ways African governments can harness these opportunities. Then later, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. But first, let's start the show with a story that continues to make headlines here in the UK and across the world. Hundreds of thousands of union members across rail, postal, teaching and medical sectors have all staged walkouts over the past few days, weeks and months, and unfortunately for Britons, more industrial action is to come. The dispute is predominantly about attaining higher wages, as inflation is at a near 40-year high. There are other factors at play though, which include working conditions, job satisfaction and the overall gloomy mood across the country.
We have been left no alternative. Our members have voted for strike action today because we've been left no alternative from the government. We've had another poor pay award and services are increasingly on the decline across the country, across the NHS, and the government will refuse to negotiate with us over pay, the most basic of issues that we have, and it's left us no alternative but to take action against it.
Well, we sincerely hope that it doesn't put, it won't be putting serious cases at risk. We've put in place contingency plans. Despite what the Secretary of State may have said, we've put in place contingency plans in every single trust where our members are taking strike action across England, all agreed with the employers and worked out in a lot of detail, took weeks to get it. So this implication that somehow we've been negligent is really quite shocking and scaremongering across the public. We have people here on strike who will be leaving their pickets to go and get into an ambulance when a call comes, because an ambulance picket is not like any other picket. It's an operational picket, and people come and go because if they get a call, there's an ambulance sitting there, two of them will leave and get into the ambulance and go and look after the public. The fact that the service is being, so run down means that staff are leaving in their droves, and that puts additional pressure on those staff who are left behind, and that means they are now leaving as well, and so the service is finding it really difficult to recruit and retain staff. And that all means the additional pressure that you get through the NHS system, because the NHS is breaking down. And this government has done nothing about it. They won't invest properly in staff. And staff are essential to the NHS. And all we're saying to them is protect patients by looking after your staff.
We need to have higher staffing, we need to have more hospital beds, we need to have decent funding for our staff as well, because we need recruitment and we need to keep the staff that are in London, and we need to make sure they stay here and carry on doing the job that they're paid for.
The ongoing winter of discontent was a topic of major debate during the last Prime Minister questions before the Christmas and New Year break.
Well, we have an independent process that looks at these issues in the round, that looks at the pressure for many viewers faced with higher taxes, faced with cost of living pressures, and balances those with the needs of our NHS as well. And that independent pay review looks at these issues, and we have accepted their recommendations in full. But we also recognise the huge contribution that we saw from nurses during the pandemic, and that's why last year we made a special case where nurses got an extra 3% when others in the public sector did not. But we've got to balance that against what is affordable to the wider economy, and asking for a 19% pay rise way above what most viewers themselves are receiving is not affordable given the many other economic pressures that we face.
Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Dr. Oge Olozue, a GP partner and trainer based in North London. Dr. Oge Olozue, thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedule. I can see you're talking to me from work, so you haven't joined the picket line this week. The Royal College of Nursing, they've walked out. It's an unprecedented strike. How did we get here?
So it's been a few years in the making, I think. Several years of pay freezes, several years of, not meeting inflation pay rises. We've had the pandemic. I mean, the nurses have worked tirelessly, frontline. They put their lives at risk every single day. So I think it's more than pay, to be fair. It's also about safe working conditions. There's just not enough staff. We have over 100,000 vacancies in the NHS. I believe over 50,000 nurse vacancies. So it's a bigger, wider issue. People want to come to work and do a safe job, and they don't feel like they're able to do this at the moment. And that affects people's morale and also their ability to do their work.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times when we talk about issues in the United Kingdom, our viewers in Nigeria don't understand. But considering how many Nigerian nurses they are, I think they're pretty abreast of this discussion. The Chancellor has said that increasing pay will spiral inflation. We know, Dr. Oge, we've been talking about it all the time. Inflation is at a 41-year high. It's not just nurses and teachers and rail workers that are seeing their wages, dissolve in their back pocket. We all are. They take advice from an independent pay review body. They're saying 19%, no chance, 4 to 5%. Can you not sympathise or understand that?
In the context of what's happened over the last few years, you can't take this year in isolation. You have to look at the last 10, even 15 years as a total. And it's made all the more worse because of the high inflation at the moment. I think you have to look at all them, because it's not just nurses, look at all the people that are having industrial action. A lot of them are the key workers during the pandemic, the people that put their lives on the line. So I think as a society, we have to decide, what do we value? I get that, pockets are tight, budgets are tight, but where there's a will, there's a way. Where there's political will, they will find a way. They found a way to fund lots of things during the pandemic, which was great, but then pay NHS morale, key workers' morale, and really valuing them in a way that means that they can feed their families. Because we're not talking about excesses here. We're talking about people making ends meet. And I think as a society, we have to decide, what do we value, and then act accordingly.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's not just about clapping outside your doorstep, is it? Or, beating a pot and a pan together. These are key workers, and they have had, extensive trauma during COVID-19. I wanted to go back, if we can, and can you talk to us before you go about the role that you're doing out in that practice in North London and how things have changed since the pandemic? I think a lot of our viewers will be shocked to hear that some, people are waiting 11 hours in an ambulance outside of a hospital. Even for me, if I call my GP today, Dr. Oge, I don't think they'll give me an appointment until second, third week of January.
Yeah, I did the same for a relative yesterday, offered an appointment in mid-January. Ultimately, the system is under pressure. It isn't that people are not working. People are working harder than ever. General practice alone is providing more appointments than before the pandemic for less people doing the job. So there's going to be a bottleneck somewhere. So we want to do a good job. We want to provide equitable access and good quality care, but there needs to be enough of us. We need a system that values the work that's done, not just in general practice, obviously secondary care, not just secondary care, we're talking about the ambulances. The whole system is under pressure, hence why we're seeing the waiting times and the waiting lists and the waiting times for acute care and as well as chronic care. And don't forget cancer care and other long-term conditions. So there's a lot we're trying to do. And we are wanting to do a good job, but when there's few of us doing more work, something has to give somewhere.
Absolutely. Let's just hope that Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, or even the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, can sit down with the Royal College of Nursing and try to, renegotiate the salary. As the independent pay review, the former chair said on BBC Radio 4 this morning, they can reconsider. Let's hope they do in time. Dr. Oge Olozue, a GP partner and trainer at a practice in North London, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule today. Well, earlier I was joined by our business correspondent Simon Pusey for more on this story. Simon, so the House of Commons may have shut down for the year, but union bosses are still working. We have seen unprecedented strikes dozens, probably even thousands of Christmas parties have been cancelled because people can't get down into London. We've seen an unprecedented strike from thousands of members from the Royal College of Nursing and postal strikes. Every sector just seems disgruntled at the moment. How did we get here? And do you think things can potentially get better in the new year?
Yeah, I think better is really the only way that they can get. They're obviously striking at the moment because they know Christmas is the time to hit the government the hardest, really. That's the time when hospitality industry, they make a lot of their money. And so taking that away from people they know is going to hurt. It depends really which side of the argument you're on. But I can see it both ways. You've got nurses who are using food banks, so they're people in work, getting paid, and yet they're struggling to afford their heating bills and using food banks. People would say, well, that's unsustainable, of course. They're asking for a 19% pay rise, which the government says, and Labour Party actually agree, is inaffordable. But what the Labour Party are saying is that the Conservatives aren't getting around the table and speaking to these unions and trying to do more. And then you've got the other people who are the people who are being affected within hospitality or within people having their parties cancelled, not being able to get into work, not being able to have their operation.
Missing post.
Exactly, missing post. You
Christmas
would have got
cards.
my present if it hadn't been got
Exactly,
lost
still
in the
waiting
post.
for it.
So I think, there are two sides to the argument here, and it's really hard to see a right and a wrong one because, of course, you don't think nurses should be using food banks, especially after the COVID years that we've gone through and them going into work. But then at the same time, you can understand why the government wouldn't want to raise their pay by 19% because that seems like a huge amount. So it's a really hard one, this. I think the government do need to show that they are talking slightly more to the unions so that it isn't just this stalemate that it seems to be at the moment, because people out there want to see things improving. They don't want to have, we've got a huge amount of people seem to have illnesses at the moment after sort of 2 years indoors, staying away and
including mental health.
Yeah, exactly. And then with everything else, with trains and with hospitals and fire departments, and it just looks like it's all sort of crashing down, that winter of discontent, as we were talking about earlier. I think the government needs to look like they are engaging with the unions, and then hopefully there can be some kind of agreement that pleases both sides, because at the moment it is pretty depressing.
Absolutely. We've had the British media and the pollsters are saying that, public support for, unions is waning, as it would, because, of course, no one's going to be happy if it takes you 4 hours to get to work or you're missing a life-changing surgery. But do you think, the unions and the industrial action are quite representative of just the mood in the country at the moment? People are just... we haven't been this poor in 40 years.
Yeah, well, cost of living is increasing, inflation... highest in 40 years, like you say. So, yeah, of course, people need pay rises. And if you look at the statistics, private sector pay has gone up much more than public sector pay.
Still under inflation, though.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But, the public sector pay is so far under inflation that what other option do they have, really? So I think public support is likely to wane for these because, exactly, you don't want to be worrying about how you're going to get home for Christmas or all of the other things that are happening. But at the same time, if you're one of the public sector staff members who are striking at the moment, nurses don't want to not be seeing to their patients. Nurses are there to help and to care. They're not going to walk out unless it's absolutely extreme. And they are still there for life-saving, operations. But I don't think any of these people want to be walking out of work. But I do understand their frustration that, seemingly in some occasions the government don't seem to be listening, don't seem to be getting around the negotiating table to try and find a breakthrough.
Yeah, thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
And Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you too.
In a moment, I'll be speaking with Keye Oduneye, a communication and change consultant, about the ways Africa can harness its overwhelmingly vast population of internet users. But until then, here's Teniola Oyetayo with a breakdown of the biggest business news stories of the week.
The UK economy shrank by more than first thought in the first months of September, putting it bottom among the group of 7 nations. According to the Office of National Statistics, the economy contracted by 0.3% compared with a previous estimate of 0.2%, as business investment performed worse than first thought. France's privacy watchdog has fined US tech giant Microsoft €60 million for imposing advertising cookies on users. In the largest fine imposed in 2022, the National Commission for Technology and Freedoms said Microsoft search engine Bing had not set up a system allowing users to refuse cookies as simply as accepting them. The company has been given 3 months to rectify the issue, with a potential further penalty of 60,000 euros per day overdue. And the new look of banknotes featuring the image of King Charles has been revealed by the Bank of England. The portrait will be the only change to existing designs of 5, 10, 20 and 50 pounds note and will start to enter circulation from mid-2024. Teniola Uyetayo for Channels Business Global.
Thanks, Tenny. Now to our final topic. Africa's digital ecosystem presents a unique and urgent opportunity to accelerate economic prosperity on the continent while expanding opportunities for foreign direct investment. With African youth anticipated to account for nearly half of the global youth population within the next decade, economists say it's essential that governments harness their capital sooner rather than later. Earlier, I was joined in the studio by Keye Oduneye, a communication and change consultant, for his insights on the matter. Keye Oduneye, it's a pleasure to have you in the Channels Business Global studio. You are a very wise man, so I'm so sorry to start with a pretty obvious question, but why do you think it's so important to unlock the potential through access to education, training and decent jobs for Africa's under 25 population, which is 60% of the continent?
60% and growing. First and foremost, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. First and foremost, I'll sound really old school on this. The youth are our future. And what that means in that sense is, if we don't create a foundation in which we're hoping to retire to, what is going to be left of our nation, first thing. But second thing, which is most important, is with this population comes opportunity, creativity, passion. And if, as a nation or as a people, we're not empowering these people, what starts to happen is, one, now that we're open to the global market, we get foreign investors being able to cater for them. Second thing, we've been in a position where we have people who create a whole economy away from the government. So in reality, one of the key things is that education, training and jobs very much builds a foundation, not just for them, but for us to be able to grow into and depend on, but most importantly, to have Nigeria that will exist way after us and our legacies, in all honesty.
Yeah, thank you for painting that picture there, because that's a very important point. You talked about the youth. We know that the digital revolution is ongoing. Some say Africa's passing through that at the moment. You only need to go on Instagram and you can see what they're consuming, things that we may not, be able to, like, but they certainly do like it. What kind of other opportunities is the digital economy providing?
Well, one of the great things is, when we look at the digital economy, what starts to happen is we have freedom. Freedom for these youths more than ever to almost exist without a government in mind. And why is that important? What's starting to happen now is that for so long, we've had Nigerians depend on the whole government sector and how things are run. We've had the private sector taking its own whole form. But now we have a new grassroots sector. And these sectors are the digital savvy individuals. The ones who are not just users, but actually creators and actually becoming influencers. And now they're in a better position where they don't need role models from Nigerians in front of them. They now have global role models. So they can do business with the global market without a government they need to depend on. And they can do business and interact from anywhere in the world, as long as they have the basics, the right equipment, and they're good to go.
You've mentioned twice now about, the youth kind of working away from the government. Are you not describing the private sector? Why are you, singling that out? Isn't that the heartbeat of the economy, the private sector?
So, okay. The thing with the private sector for so long is the private sector is structured. It has a control. We can put names to who and what is going on. But now with the type of setup or the right type of environment, unfortunately, the government or the seeds we've planted over the years have created in Nigeria, you now have a group of people, I would call them the grassroots ecosystem, of people who don't have names. They don't have company names. They don't have brands. They exist somewhere far, far away or somewhere right next door. But because of the help of tech, because of the help of content needed and interaction and creativity and cheap labor, in all honesty, what is going on now is that these individuals can now not be taxed. They can now not be found.
Wow.
So it's new income that is coming from different parts of the world, which India once used to be, and almost which China kind of still is, that Nigeria's becoming. And with that, and when it's not monitored, do they still fall under the private sector?
Yeah, that's a really insightful point there. We can't talk about Africa and youth without talking about a term that's been trending. I'm surprised it didn't list on the Google Trends for this year, Jakpa. Forgive me if I haven't pronounced that right. But, you know, on the one hand, we do love our Nigerian brothers and sisters, our Pan-African brothers and sisters, you know, coming into Britain. They contribute so much to the economy. I think that's a major point we need to mention. Most of them are not illegal migrants. You know, they're coming here to study. And, you know, they're taking up a lot of jobs in the UK that we need back home. Doctors. I read a report this week that the British government may be allowing teachers to come in. We want teachers to be able to earn more, but we need teachers in Africa. What is your whole perception or your analysis of the whole Jakpa argument?
Okay. So first and foremost, I've listened to so many debates. You have the people who are returning back home and say, you know what, it's not what's been promised. You have people who are saying that, you know what, it's better than where they're coming from. And I think, in all honesty, my take on it is that my latter point is where it focuses on. If you're in a country where you followed all the rules of the land, you've got the qualifications, you put in the work, you put in the effort, you're trying to do things the right way. I'm saying that because the right way now is changing day by day.
Goodness.
If you're not a politician or you're not in the entertainment industry, which is an industry created away from the government, let's remember that. Because now government are taking credit that Afrobeats is theirs, which it's not. But if you're not in those boxes, being a teacher is not given the credit it once used to have. So if you're in a position where you can create stability for your family, where having light and electricity is not a prayer or hoping that God will make a way, but it's a norm.
Social media, again, the digital economy, so much pressure, so much pressure. I was speaking to Kid Wire. That was a popular interview I conducted a couple of weeks ago. He's massive on social media, you know, millions of followers, a reality TV star. But people do like to emulate that lifestyle by fire, by force, by any means necessary. When we are talking about, you know, training up our youths, how important is financial inclusion? And I want to bring it closer to the diaspora now and talk about, you know, those in the UK. We see it, don't we, you know, going out, spending their money, buying all those clothes, but do they understand that they do need to save for the future? How do we teach them that?
Okay, first and foremost, we have the approach where everyone's living for now. And unfortunately, COVID has also brought that back home. You can do so much work and tomorrow's not promised. So there's that confusion. But then there's the reality of everything, which is, yes, tomorrow's not promised, but yet you need to be able to hope and plan for tomorrow.
Just a couple of days will be in 2023. What are you going to be up to? Tell us before you go.
2023, two key things. One of them, I'm turning my scope back into the continent, which is trying to focus on human capital development in talks with Sierra Leonean government, as well as with Nigerian government, working on a few things in the pipeline. And in the UK, I'm really focusing much more on my field, which is the personal and professional development, which is more the change management approach for businesses, individuals, and most important sectors.
Well, if you don't charge too much, you might have a client in me. Thank you so much, Keye Odunaye, communication and change consultant. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom today. Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Merry Christmas.